Selina Aragon dreamed of a new life in Dubai, but Khalid Al-Farez's obsession with purity turned their wedding night into a nightmare, unraveling a deadly secret that pulled Farah Dastan, Detective Omar Rasheed, and Dr. Liana Cortez into a shocking case of love, betrayal, and murder. The wedding of Selina Aragon and Khalid Al-Farez was the kind of event that Tay whispered about long after the night had ended. Everything about it looked like a dream. Guests arrived at a resort that seemed to glitter under the warm lights of Dubai's skyline. Golden decorations hung from every corner of the hall, roses draped across the tables, and a towering white cake stood in the center like a monument of celebration. Musicians played soft melodies, and photographers captured every smile, every moment, every sign of what seemed to be a fairy tale beginning. Selina, dressed in a delicate gown stitched with crystals, moved gracefully through the hall. Her beauty caught every eye, and her nervous smile was mistaken for the shyness of a new bride. But beneath her sparkling dress and perfectly painted face, she carried a secret that weighed heavily on her heart, a truth she feared might shatter everything around her. Khalid Al-Farez looked like the perfect groom, tall and confident, with an aura of wealth and control. He was a businessman known for his empire built on property and trade, and people around him respected his strict values. He moved through the crowd, greeting relatives, his hand resting firmly on Selina's back, as if to show ownership. To his family, he had finally chosen a bride, and his decision was unquestionable. But not everyone in his family was convinced. His younger sister, Farah Dastan, watched the bride carefully from across the hall. Farah was known for her sharp instincts, and as she studied Selina, she noticed the tension hidden behind the smile, the small tremors in her hands, the way her eyes darted toward the exits, as though she felt trapped in a golden cage. Farah did not voice her suspicion, but she carried it quietly like a shadow that would not leave her. The evening unfolded with dances and blessings. Friends raised glasses filled with sparkling juice to toast the couple's future, praising their union as if it were a story straight out of a romance tale. Guests whispered about how lucky Selina was to marry into such wealth, while others admired Khalid for choosing a woman of humble origins, claiming it showed his generosity of spirit. For Selina, every compliment and every smile felt like a weight pressing her down. She kept thinking of the night ahead, of the expectations she could not meet, and her heart pounded with fear. But she masked it well, laughing when prompted, holding Khalid's hand tightly when cameras flashed, and walking gracefully even when her knees felt weak. As the night wore on, the celebrations grew louder, the music faster, and the guests merrier. Yet, beneath the golden lights and cheerful noise, a sense of unease lingered. Farah noticed it, the way Selina avoided long conversations, the way her gaze would drift whenever marriage was praised as purity and honor. Something about this bride felt as though she carried a burden she could not share. Farah wondered what secret could cause such quiet dread on a night meant for joy, but she chose silence. She told herself perhaps she was only imagining things. Perhaps her brother had truly found happiness. When the ceremony ended, the couple was escorted to their suite, a lavish room prepared with flowers and silk sheets. The crowd cheered as the doors closed behind them, believing the storybook wedding had ended in perfection. But in truth, the beginning of the marriage was far from a fairy tale. It was the start of a night that would soon twist into darkness. Selina stepped into the suite with trembling hands, hiding her fear as Khalid locked the door. The sound of laughter and music faded outside, leaving only silence. She stood inside the golden cage she had entered, knowing the truth she carried could not stay hidden much longer. What no one realized that night was that the secret Selina feared most would turn her wedding into a nightmare, one that would end with blood on silk sheets, and a story that would haunt Dubai forever. The morning after the wedding was supposed to be filled with laughter, photographs, and stories of joy. Instead, it began with a scream. A hotel worker delivering breakfast knocked on the newlyweds' door, and after receiving no answer, used a spare key to enter. The sight that greeted him froze his blood. Selina Aragon lay motionless on the bed, her body partially hidden beneath a white silk sheet, her skin pale against the golden glow of the luxurious suite. The room smelled faintly of spilled wine and perfume, but the silence inside was heavier than anything the worker had ever felt. Khalid Al-Farez, the groom who had celebrated only hours earlier, was nowhere to be found. News spread quickly through the hotel corridor. Guests whispered and gasped as police were called. Detective Omar Rasheed arrived with his team, his eyes narrowing as he examined the scene. It was immediately clear this was no natural death. The silk sheet covering Selina was stained in places, and beneath it, bruises spread across her arms and neck. The room bore signs of a violent struggle, pillows scattered, a shattered glass near the bed, and deep scratches etched into the polished wood of the headboard. For Omar, it was obvious that this was not a robbery gone wrong. The jewelry on Selina's wrists still glittered under the light, and her handbag lay untouched on the dressing table with cash and cards intact. Whoever had done this had not come for money. They had come for... Investigators began their work carefully, photographing every corner of the suite. Forensic officers dusted for prints, collected fibers, and gathered wine glasses with traces of fingerprints smeared across them. The timeline became the first puzzle. Witnesses claimed they saw Khalid escorting Selina into the room after the celebration, both of them smiling for the cameras as the doors closed. No one else was seen entering afterward. Yet the husband had vanished before dawn. Hotel security was checked immediately, and CCTV footage revealed Khalid leaving the building just after midnight, his expression hard and frantic. He wore a dark jacket, his head lowered as though hiding from recognition. From that moment, his trail vanished into the night. Detective Omar knew the first assumption was always the simplest: the husband. But he also knew cases could twist in unexpected ways. To proceed with certainty, he needed the science. Selina's body was carefully taken for autopsy. The bruises suggested she had been overpowered, but there was also a faint mark along her wrist that looked almost like restraint. The details painted a picture of fear and violence, of a night that ended in horror. Omar wondered what could have triggered such brutality. A man celebrated for his control and wealth, a bride admired for her beauty. How could their story end like this within hours of vows being exchanged? Meanwhile, the Al-Farez family arrived at the hotel, their grief mixed with disbelief. Farah Dastan, Khalid's younger sister, was pale and silent as she entered the corridor, where police stood guard. She asked about Selina, but Omar's stern face told her all she needed to know. While the family mourned publicly, Farah's mind raced. She had sensed something unsettling about Selina during the wedding, a tension hidden behind her polite smiles, but never had she imagined this end. The thought that her own brother might have harmed his bride gnawed at her, even as relatives whispered about conspiracies and enemies trying to ruin their family's reputation. As the investigation deepened, Omar ordered an immediate search for Khalid across the city. Airports and border checkpoints were alerted, and his image was circulated among security forces. Still, there was no sign of him. Forensic teams continued their work in the suite, and one discovery raised more questions. Traces of a sedative were found in the half-empty wine glass beside the bed. It suggested premeditation, a chilling detail that hinted this act of violence was not spontaneous but carefully thought out. The discovery shook the case wide open. If Khalid had planned this, then his disappearance was more than guilt. It was a... Yet Omar could not ignore the other fingerprints on the wine glass, faint but present, belonging to someone else entirely. Suddenly, the crime was no longer simple. The mystery grew heavier, the web more tangled. Selina's death was not only about rage or betrayal. It was about secrets layered beneath the surface, secrets waiting to unravel and reveal truths no one in the glittering world of Dubai high society wanted to face. Khalid Al-Farez's disappearance after the wedding night only intensified suspicion. Detectives pieced together the hours before Selina's death, and the picture that emerged was one of fury and obsession. Khalid had always been known for his rigid expectations. His wealth and influence gave him power, but those who knew him closely understood he carried a darker side, a fixation on control, on purity, and on appearances. He believed honor was not only tied to his name, but to the women associated with him. That belief would become the driving force behind Selina's tragic end. Through interviews with his relatives and associates, investigators learned that Khalid had spoken often of wanting a bride who was untouched, someone who would uphold his image. The discovery that Selina was not what he expected shattered the facade he had carefully built for himself. According to the forensic findings, their wedding night had started with wine and laughter, but once Khalid confronted Selina, everything changed. Anger took over, and the evening spiraled into violence. Detective Omar Rasheed reviewed the evidence again and again. The bruises on Selina's body told the story of an assault filled with rage, not just a single outburst, but repeated strikes fueled by fury. Farah Dastan, Khalid's younger sister, became a crucial voice during the investigation. While her family clung to denial, Farah admitted to the police that her brother had long harbored dangerous ideas about honor. She spoke of past relationships he ended violently, though never to this extent. Her words painted a picture of a man unable to accept imperfection, a man who demanded control to the point of cruelty. She recalled how, during their childhood, Khalid would punish even small mistakes with disproportionate anger. As an adult, those impulses grew sharper, hidden beneath charm and wealth. The timeline aligned with Farah's fears. CCTV footage showed Khalid leaving the hotel just after midnight, his movements hurried and unstable. Witnesses outside described a man who looked panicked, his jacket pulled up around his face. It was not the image of a calm groom leaving his bride behind. It was the image of a man fleeing from what he had done. For Omar, this was enough to issue an alert across Dubai and beyond. Khalid was officially declared the prime suspect in Selina's murder. Still, the detective could not ignore the unease gnawing at him. If this had been a crime of sudden rage, why were there traces of sedative in Selina's system? That detail suggested forethought. It was as if someone wanted her weakened, unable to resist. But who, and why? Khalid's known personality leaned toward violent outbursts, rather than meticulous planning. Yet here, the evidence hinted at both. Perhaps Omar thought this was Khalid's attempt to control every moment, to strip Selina of even the chance to defend herself. As the manhunt expanded, Khalid's past resurfaced in disturbing ways. Former acquaintances revealed incidents of explosive temper hidden from the public eye. Business rivals recalled how he handled betrayal with threats and intimidation. Even his staff whispered of late-night arguments and broken objects in his villa. None had spoken openly before, fearing his power, but Selina's death changed everything. Now people came forward, piece by piece, building the portrait of a man who was capable of the worst. Back at the morgue, Dr. Liana Cortez continued her analysis, confirming that the sedative had been ingested shortly before Selina's death. The bruises, however, were inflicted afterward, suggesting Khalid's anger had exploded once the sedative failed to give him the control he craved. This revelation pushed the theory of premeditation further. Omar began to believe Khalid had entered the wedding night already planning to test or trap his new wife, unable to accept any deviation from his expectations. Meanwhile, whispers swirled in Dubai's elite circle. Many were horrified at the brutality, but others quietly defended Khalid, insisting Selina must have deceived him. The case became more than a murder. It became a clash of tradition, power, and justice. For Selina's friends back in the Philippines, the news was devastating. They remembered her as a young woman who left to find a better life, only to meet a cruel end in a world far from home. As days passed without Khalid's capture, pressure mounted on authorities. Omar knew the manhunt had to succeed quickly. If Khalid reached another country, wealth and influence could shield him from consequences. Border checkpoints were tightened, airports monitored, and ports searched. The chase for Khalid Al-Farez was no longer just about finding a fugitive groom. It was about proving that power and obsession could not erase the truth of what happened to Selina Aragon on her wedding night. Dr. Liana Cortez findings shifted the entire direction of the investigation. While bruises and marks of violence were expected in a case like this, the traces of sedative in Selina's bloodstream raised unsettling questions. It meant that someone had attempted to weaken her before the violent confrontation. The discovery complicated everything, for it suggested the crime had not been purely impulsive rage. Instead, there was a layer of premeditation. Detective Omar Rasheed studied the report carefully, noting the dosage and the timing. The sedative had been ingested less than an hour before Selina's death. This meant the wine served that night carried more than just celebration. It carried poison in disguise. The suite was searched again with greater precision. The wine glass near Selina's side was swabbed for prints, and to everyone's surprise, the results showed more than Khalid's fingerprints. A second set appeared faintly smaller, belonging to a woman. That revelation widened the investigation, forcing the detectives to ask an uncomfortable question. Who else had been inside the room on the wedding night? The idea challenged the original assumption that only Khalid and Selina were present. Someone else's presence opened the possibility of accomplice or interference. Attention quickly turned toward Farah. During her earlier statements, she had admitted to visiting Selina before the end of the wedding celebrations. At first, she claimed it was to offer sisterly advice, to remind her of the expectations of marrying into a traditional family. But now, the presence of her fingerprints on the glass made her account suspicious. When questioned again, she revealed more. She confessed that she had brought a small vial of liquid to Selina's room, claiming it was meant to calm her nerves before the wedding. According to Farah, she only intended to ease the bride's anxiety, but her words rang hollow against the forensic evidence. What she described as harmless was in fact a sedative strong enough to render Selina vulnerable. Omar considered the weight of this confession. If Farah's account was true, her role in the tragedy was deeper than the family would ever accept. Had she been trying to help her brother by manipulating Selina, or had she acted out of personal malice toward the bride she never approved of? Farah's expression during questioning showed both fear and stubbornness. She admitted to handing Selina the glass of wine, but insisted she left the suite before Khalid arrived. She maintained that what happened afterward was solely her brother's doing. Still, her involvement could not be dismissed. The discovery of Farah's fingerprints and her confession sparked tension within the Al-Farez family. Some refused to believe she could have contributed to the crime, while others whispered that she had always been fiercely protective of Khalid, willing to act in his shadow. The family's reputation, once a shield, was now crumbling under scandal. Newspapers hinted at betrayal within, portraying the once perfect wedding as a story of deception, cruelty, and hidden conspiracies. For Omar, the case now seemed like a twisted puzzle. Khalid's actions reflected rage, but Farah's role suggested calculated interference. Perhaps Selina had been cornered on all sides, trapped by a husband's obsession and a sister-in-law's manipulation. If Farah had not given her the sedative, would Selina have been strong enough to defend herself? Would she have survived the night? The line between direct guilt and indirect responsibility blurred, but the law demanded both be addressed. Meanwhile, search teams continued their pursuit of Khalid, tracking his movements through phone records and financial transactions. His attempt to vanish into the desert only proved his guilt, but while his capture loomed, the discovery of Farah's fingerprints ensured that the case was no longer about a single man losing control. It was about an entire family tangled in secrecy and dishonor. The image of Selina lying lifeless on silk sheets became the haunting symbol of how far people would go to protect pride and tradition. The investigation was no longer simple justice. It was about uncovering every shadow in a story that began with celebration and ended with betrayal. The hunt for Khalid Al-Farez came to an end days later at the Oman border. Disguised in plain clothes with his beard trimmed and his usual aura of wealth stripped away, he tried to slip across undetected, but his face had been broadcast across checkpoints, and his name triggered immediate alarm. Armed officers surrounded the vehicle he had bribed his way into, pulling him out before he could vanish. He was brought back to Dubai in handcuffs,
no longer the untouchable businessman celebrated at his wedding, but a fugitive reduced to silence. His capture marked a turning point, but it did not close the case. Instead, it revealed deeper fractures. During interrogation, Khalid admitted to killing Selina. His words were cold and without remorse. He spoke of betrayal, of discovering that the woman he had married was not what he believed her to be. He called it deception, as though that single word could justify the bruises, the broken struggle, and the lifeless body found on the bed. He insisted his honor had been destroyed, and in his twisted logic he believed his violence was necessary. But when detectives presented the evidence of the sedative, Khalid faltered. He denied drugging her, denied planning anything in advance. For the first time his certainty cracked. The second set of fingerprints on the wine glass became the weapon that broke his arrogance. The prints were matched beyond doubt to his sister Farah Dastan. When confronted with this, Khalid's silence grew heavy. He realized that his own sister's involvement would destroy not just him but the entire family's name. The truth cornered him in ways violence never could. Farah was questioned again, and under pressure she confessed fully. She admitted to slipping the sedative into Selina's wine. She claimed it was never intended to kill her, only to ensure the wedding night passed without conflict. In her eyes she thought she was helping her brother preserve his fragile sense of control. But her plan had backfired in the most horrific way. The drug had weakened Selina, leaving her unable to resist when Khalid's rage erupted. The courtroom drama that followed captured the attention of Dubai and beyond. The Al-Farez family, once a symbol of wealth and prestige, became the focus of scandal. Journalists filled the air with stories of betrayal, tradition twisted into cruelty, and a bride whose only mistake was seeking a better life. Selina's family in the Philippines watched the trial unfold with broken hearts, unable to believe their daughter had been treated as less than human. They remembered her as a hopeful young woman, not the tragic victim painted in headlines. The court's verdict was firm. Khalid Al-Farez was found guilty of murder, sentenced to life imprisonment for his violent actions and his attempt to flee justice. Farah Dastan, though not directly responsible for the killing, was declared complicit in the crime. Her decision to drug Selina created the conditions for the murder to occur, and the law held her accountable. She received a lengthy prison sentence, her once proud name tarnished forever. The family that had stood so proudly at the wedding now faced the shame of disgrace, their legacy stained by blood. For Detective Omar Rasheed, the conclusion was bittersweet. Justice had been served, yet the truth carried no triumph. He thought of Selina often, of the photographs showing her smiling nervously in her crystal-studded gown, unaware that her new life would last only hours. He thought of the wasted potential, of how easily cruelty disguised as honor could destroy innocence. Forensic pathologist Liana Cortez echoed the sentiment in her report, writing that Selina's case was a reminder of how fragile life became when pride and obsession took precedence over humanity. In the end, Selina Aragon's story became a sin. It was retold in whispers and headlines, as a cautionary tale of hidden secrets, suffocating traditions, and the deadly consequences of control. What began as a wedding celebrated under golden lights turned into a crime that exposed the darkest corners of a powerful family. The bride who once walked into her new life with trembling hands became the voice for countless women, silenced by fear. Her tragedy, carved into memory, ensured that behind the glitter of Dubai's high society, people would forever remember the night when honor turned to horror and love to murder.